It started like any other day, but I remember feeling a strange heaviness in my chest as I drove through town. The funeral was supposed to be quiet, respectful. My father's passing hit us all hard, but I never imagined that soon I'd be hit with something so brutal, so devastating I'd question every memory I ever had with her. We'd been together for years. She swore she loved me, promised she'd stay faithful. That's what made this betrayal cut so deep. Her name was Lisa. She was the kind of woman who could turn heads without even trying. Bright smile, warm eyes, always so caring, at least that's what I thought. She'd come to my family's house every weekend, help my mother with the cooking, laugh at my dad's terrible jokes. I trusted her completely. That's why I never saw the signs. That's why I didn't suspect a thing. The day of the funeral, everything felt numb. The cold wind brushed against my face as I stood in front of my father's casket. I was trying to hold it together, my hands clenched into fists, palms sweaty. I kept telling myself to stay strong, and then I saw her. She was standing close to my brother, Mark. They looked oddly comfortable, smiling, whispering. My stomach twisted. My heart started pounding harder. That wasn't right. I approached slowly, trying to look casual, but my eyes fixed on them. Mark was leaning in, whispering into her ear. She was laughing, a genuine laugh that I'd never heard from her before. The kind of laugh that says, "We're doing something wrong, but we don't care." I felt the blood drain from my face. My skin prickled with heat, my fists clenched tighter. It was like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Lisa, my wife, the woman I thought I knew, was cheating on me with my own brother, there at my father's funeral. It was surreal, like a sick nightmare. I looked down at my hands, trembling. My knees felt weak, like I might fall over. I wanted to scream, to cry, but all I could do was stand there and watch them. I took a step back, trying to process what I'd just seen. I wanted to run, to punch something, but I knew I had to stay quiet. I needed to observe more, gather my thoughts. I shuffled closer, pretending to be busy with my coat, but my eyes never left them. I saw her reach out, touch his arm, an intimate gesture that left no doubt. I saw the way she looked at him, like he was her only escape. That moment, that sickening revelation, burned into my mind. My world was shattered. She'd sworn she loved me. She'd claimed I was everything. And now I knew she had lied, right there in front of everyone, in front of my dead father's memory. I remember feeling the cold draft against my neck and the strange, dull ache in my chest. My stomach dropped. I wanted to confront her then and there, but I knew this couldn't be a scene. Not yet. I had to plan, to think. I couldn't let her see me hurt, not yet. Instead, I just turned away, my mind racing. I kept asking myself, how could she do this? How could she betray me like this? The evidence was right there, her touch, the way she looked at him. That wasn't just friendship. It wasn't innocent. It was something darker, something I'd never suspected. And I could feel the anger boiling inside me, a sharp, hot ache that made my fingers tingle. As I walked away, I caught her glance. She saw me and quickly looked away. That moment, that glimpse of guilt, made my blood boil even more. I knew I had to act. I couldn't let her get away with it, not after everything. Not after I'd trusted her with my life and my heart. The funeral carried on, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept replaying what I'd seen. My stomach churned. My head spun. I had to come up with a plan. I needed revenge, something that would hit her where it hurt, something that would make her regret ever crossing me. Because I wasn't the kind of man to walk away from betrayal without a fight. I'd make sure she'd remember this day forever, the day her lies unraveled. After the funeral, I couldn't sleep. The images kept flashing in my mind. The way Lisa had touched Mark's arm, her laugh that sounded too genuine, the look in her eyes that said she was already planning her next move. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, her smile fading into something cold and unrecognizable. I felt like I'd been punched repeatedly in the gut, and now all I could think about was how to make her pay. I knew she'd lied to me for months, maybe longer. I'd always suspected something was off, the late nights, the excuses, her avoiding my gaze, but I never had proof. Now I had proof, clear as day. And with that proof, I realized I couldn't trust her anymore, not even a little bit. She faked her love for me, and I'd been a fool for believing it. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the silence deafening. My fingers clenched the steering wheel of my mind, trying to figure out what to do next. I didn't want to just confront her and hope for an explanation. That wouldn't be enough. I needed a plan, something precise, something that would leave her helpless and humiliated just like she'd left me. First, I went digging through her phone. It was obvious she'd been sneaking around. She always deleted messages too quickly, or so I thought. But I'd noticed that her phone had a pattern lock. That made me suspicious. I managed to crack it after a while, using a trick I'd read about online. Her recent texts were full of flirtatious exchanges with Mark. There was one message that made my stomach turn. "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was perfect." The words burned into my mind. She had lied to my face, told me she was working late while she was sneaking off to meet my brother. I also found receipts from a hotel near her office paid for with her card. She'd been there last week, just a few days before the funeral. The worst part, she told me she was at a conference. I felt sick. That's when I started to see the bigger picture. This wasn't just a one-time thing, it was a pattern. She'd been sneaking around, betraying me behind my back for months. I knew what I had to do. The next step was gathering evidence. I wanted everything, calls, texts, receipts, so I could make her realize I wasn't just some naive fool. I also decided to install a tracking app on her phone, not to stalk her endlessly, but enough to keep tabs on her whereabouts. I needed to know when she was lying, when she was sneaking out. I spent the next few days quietly watching her. She'd leave the house looking frantic, always with a faint hint of lipstick on her collar or her phone buzzing constantly in her purse. I started following her, keeping a safe distance but making sure I knew where she was going. It was sickening, feeling like I'd become some kind of detective in my own life, but I had no choice. One night she slipped out early. I followed her to that same hotel she'd been at before. She was with Mark. I saw them through the window, holding hands, kissing like they had no shame. I clenched my fists so tight my knuckles turned white. My stomach twisted again, a mixture of rage and heartbreak. I wanted to storm in and tear them apart. Instead, I snapped a few photos, proof of everything I'd seen. That was the moment I realized I'd never be able to trust her again. She'd betrayed me with my brother in the worst possible way, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. So I started planning my revenge. I knew I couldn't just confront her without preparation. I wanted her to feel the pain she'd caused me, but I also wanted her to realize that trust, once broken, can never be repaired. And that's when I decided I'd expose her publicly. I'd make her regret every second she ever lied to me. But first, I needed a way to catch her off guard. Something that would make her see the consequences of her actions clearly. Something that would hit her where it hurt the most. I wasn't interested in petty fights or shouting matches. I wanted her to understand exactly what she'd lost, me and her reputation. I spent the next couple of days gathering my last pieces of evidence, organizing my plan. The plan was simple but effective. I'd record her reactions, make sure I had concrete proof, then confront her with everything. The look on her face when she realized I knew, when she saw I'd been watching her all along, would be priceless. And deep down, I knew I was doing this for myself. Not just to punish her, but because I deserved to know the truth. No more lies, no more secrets. The next step was clear. I was ready to confront her, to strip her of her lies, and finally, to take back what she'd stolen from me. My dignity, my trust, my sense of reality. The night I planned to confront her, I could feel my hands trembling, not from fear, but from a mixture of rage and resolve. Every nerve in my body was alert, like I'd just run a marathon but had to stay still, keep calm. I'd spent days perfecting the timing, making sure I had everything in place. The evidence was stacked, the words ready to spill. All I needed was her reaction, her face when she realized I knew the truth. I waited until she was out, supposedly working late again. I sat in my car parked across the street, watching her come out of the apartment. She looked hurried, like she was hiding something. As she slipped into her car, I turned on the recorder I'd hidden in my pocket. I wanted it all: her words, her tone, her facial expression. The moment she realized she was caught. She parked at the same hotel as last time, and I followed at a distance. From the shadows, I watched her enter. My heart pounded, knowing I had her cornered. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of her entering, then waited for her to come out again. About 20 minutes later, she appeared, looking more relaxed, her makeup slightly smudged. I snapped another picture. The evidence was mounting. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I'd planned this moment for days, but now that it was here, I felt like I was about to explode. I slipped inside the hotel lobby behind her, trying to stay unnoticed. I caught her in the hallway, just outside the room she'd gone into. I stepped forward, voice steady but cold. "Lisa," I said softly, "I think we need to talk." She froze, her eyes wide in shock. "What are you doing here?" "I saw you," I said, voice trembling slightly. "I followed you, I saw everything." Her face drained of color. "You've been spying on me." "Spying? No, just finally seeing the truth. You lied to me, Lisa. All this time I was blind, but I saw enough." I pulled out my phone, showing the pictures. "You and Mark together in that hotel last week during my father's funeral." Her lips parted, but she said nothing. Her hands trembled. I saw the panic in her eyes, the guilt I'd been waiting for. I pressed on. "Why? Why did you do this? How could you betray me like this, especially now when I needed you the most?" She looked like she wanted to say something, but no words came. Instead, she lowered her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. That was the moment I decided I'd had enough. I'd been patient for too long. Now it was time to take control. "You lied about everything, about being at work, about loving me," I continued, voice breaking with anger. "You played me for a fool, and I'm sick of it. I want answers." She looked up at me, her voice trembling. I didn't mean for it to hurt you. It just happened. I was lonely, and Mark, we just found comfort in each other." "Comfort? Is that what you call it? Running behind my back, sneaking around during my father's funeral, that's not comfort, that's betrayal. And I want you to understand something. You're not the person I thought you were. Not anymore." Her face crumpled and she whispered, "Please don't do this. I love you." I made a mistake. That was enough. I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I told her to pack her things, to leave my house that very night. I wanted her gone, so she'd finally face the consequences of her actions. The look on her face when I handed her the eviction notice was priceless. She begged, tried to explain, but none of it mattered anymore. She crossed a line I couldn't forgive. As she pulled away from the hotel, I sat in my car, staring at the taillights disappearing into the night. I felt a strange sense of relief, mixed with the deepest kind of heartbreak. I'd finally uncovered the truth, and it was as ugly as I'd feared. The fallout was immediate. I called her the next morning, telling her to meet me at the house. I handed her the keys and the papers, formal, final. I told her she'd betrayed me, and I wasn't going to keep her around to keep hurting me. She cried, pleaded, begged for a second chance, but I just shook my head. Watching her walk out that door, I knew this was the end of my chapter with her. I realized I'd been living in a bubble of trust, but that bubble had burst. Now I was left with what was real: the pain, the betrayal, and the bitter truth. In that moment, I understood something crucial. Revenge isn't about hurting someone just to hurt them. It's about reclaiming your dignity, your self-respect, and showing them that breaking your trust has consequences. That's what I was after. And even as I watched her disappear, I felt a strange sense of closure. It was time to rebuild from the ashes. After I handed her the keys and she walked out the door, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. It was like finally ripping off a bandage that had been slowly suffocating me. But underneath that relief, there was a cold, hard truth I couldn't escape. She had shattered everything I believed in. I'd trusted her with my life, my future, my heart. And she'd thrown it all away, right in front of me. In the days that followed, I stayed mostly shut in. I needed to think, to process what had happened. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, wet with tears, pleading, trying to make me understand. But I couldn't. Not anymore. I'd seen who she really was. That realization hit me like a punch to the stomach. I'd been living a lie for months, maybe longer. I started reflecting on what had gone wrong. Was I blind, too trusting, or just stupid for thinking she was different? The truth was, I'd ignored the signs. The late nights, the missed calls, the way she'd always find a way to avoid me when I got too close. I'd been too comfortable, too naive, and she'd taken advantage of that. She used my love as a weapon and twisted it into her own game. But I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I had to turn this chaos into something stronger, something I could live with. That's when the idea of revenge took root. It wasn't just about hurting her. It was about making her regret every lie, every secret, every moment she betrayed me. I wanted her to feel the loss of trust, the pain of abandonment. I wanted to make her understand what she'd destroyed. I started planning. I knew she'd try to move on quickly, probably with Mark, maybe someone new. I needed to hit her where it hurt, something that would make her realize that betrayal has consequences, that you can't just erase the damage with apologies or tears. No, I wanted to make her see that her actions had consequences far beyond what she expected. My first move was to gather everything that proved her lies: photos, texts, receipts. I wanted to be precise, undeniable. I stayed up late, digging through her phone, her emails. I found messages where she'd been planning her getaways, hiding her tracks, and I kept a record of it all. When I found the receipts from the hotel, I printed them out, then took screenshots of the texts she'd sent Mark, full of flirtation and promises. But I knew evidence alone wouldn't be enough. I needed leverage, something that would make her feel vulnerable, exposed. That's when I decided to leak some of her messages online. Not to humiliate her publicly for the sake of revenge, but to let her see what happens when trust is shattered. I created a fake account, something anonymous, and posted snippets of her conversations on a discreet forum where women share stories of betrayal. I kept her identity hidden, but enough to make her realize that her secrets were no longer hers alone. The night I posted the evidence, I felt a strange rush. Part anger, part satisfaction. I watched her reactions unfold over the next few days: initial denial, then panic. Her social media started getting messages. Friends she trusted, acquaintances, even some relatives. They all saw what I'd put out there. And the worst part, she couldn't deny it anymore. She messaged me begging for explanations, crying that it wasn't what it looked like, that she loved me. But I knew better. I responded coldly, telling her that her actions had consequences, that she'd betrayed me first and now she had to face the fallout. Watching her unravel was almost too easy. I had to remind myself, this isn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It's about setting boundaries, about showing her that trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to fix, and that betrayal comes with a steep price. That's when I made the final decision. I'd had enough. She begged me to take her back, but I knew that wouldn't fix what was broken. I needed her to see how much damage she'd caused. So I went to my lawyer, drafted the paperwork, and filed for divorce. I wanted her out of my life completely, with no excuses, no second chances. I handed her the papers myself in person, watching her eyes fill with tears, tears I didn't feel anymore. She tried to talk, to explain, but I simply told her, "You lost me the day you decided to cheat on me, and I'll never forget it." I walked away, knowing I'd won, not by hurting her physically, but by stripping her of her lies and making her see that her actions had consequences. That day, I took back control. I posted my final message on social media, giving a brief, cold summary of what she'd done, emphasizing that trust is fragile and betrayal always catches up. I knew I was done, and I felt a strange sense of peace, even if it was tinged with heartbreak. I'd finally closed that chapter. Now I tell this story to anyone out there who's been betrayed. Trust me, it hurts. But revenge isn't about revenge anymore. It's about reclaiming yourself. About saying, "You crossed a line, and I'm not going to let you get away with it." Because at the end of the day, the only person responsible for your happiness is yourself. The days after I filed for divorce, I felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. The house was eerily quiet now, every corner echoing memories of what was supposed to be a life I believed in. I kept replaying everything: the moment I saw her with Mark, the lies she told, the trust I handed her like a fragile glass that shattered into 1,000 pieces. That pain was still raw, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. The fallout was immediate. Her friends started reaching out, confused about what had happened. My social media blew up with messages, some sympathetic, some accusatory, but most just stunned by the betrayal. I had to brace myself for the fallout because I knew this was only the beginning. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about her reputation, her life unraveling as her secrets went public. I stayed quiet on my end, letting the dust settle. But I didn't just sit around feeling sorry for myself. I used that time to heal, to reflect on what I'd learned from all of this. Trust is a fragile thing. Once broken, it's nearly impossible to repair. And betrayal isn't just about the other person. It's about how you handle your own pain and what you choose to do next. One evening, about a week after I filed, she called me. Her voice was trembling and I could tell she was crying. She begged for forgiveness, said she'd do anything to fix this, to get back what we had. I listened silently, feeling the weight of her words. I wanted to feel anger, to lash out, but I knew that wouldn't serve me. Instead, I told her simply, "Lisa, you made your choice. You chose to betray me. I gave you everything and you threw it away. I'm done. I don't want to hear your apologies anymore. Just stay away." She begged again, promising she'd change, that she'd do anything to undo what she'd done. But I cut her off. I knew better now. Words wouldn't fix this. Trust, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild, especially when it's been shattered so publicly. Over the following weeks, I started rebuilding my life. I got a new job, began going to the gym, and reconnected with friends I'd neglected. Every step felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of myself. I realized I'd been living for her, for a version of life that wasn't real. Now I was finally living for me. One night I was sitting outside, the cool breeze brushing against my face, when I received a text from her. Just a simple message. "I'm sorry, please forgive me." I stared at it, fingers tightening into fists, my stomach clenched, my heart pounding. I took a deep breath, then typed back, "You had your chance, it's over now." That's when I knew I'd finally turned the page. I felt a strange sense of liberation, like I'd escaped the cage she'd built around us. For the first time in months, I felt truly free. Looking back, I understand that revenge isn't about hurting someone for the sake of pain. It's about setting boundaries, about protecting yourself, reclaiming your dignity, and showing the other person that their actions have consequences. It's about choosing to walk away from the chaos and not looking back. If I could give anyone advice, it would be this. Trust is fragile, and once it's broken, you can't always fix it, but you can rebuild yourself. You can choose how to respond, how to heal. And most importantly, you can decide that your happiness is worth more than someone else's betrayal. Now, I'm still healing, still moving forward. But I know one thing for sure: I'll never let someone's lie steal my peace again. Because real strength isn't about revenge, it's about knowing when to walk away and never looking back. The final step in my journey was the hardest but most necessary. I sat down one last time in the quiet of my apartment, the sunlight filtering through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. I packed the last of her things into a box: photos, mementos, the little things she'd left behind. As I sealed it shut, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, like I was finally freeing myself from the ghost of what we once had. I knew this wasn't just about her betrayal, it was about reclaiming my life and my peace of mind. I took her keys and the divorce papers, then handed them over to the lawyer. This was official now. I was done. No more excuses, no more lies, no more pretending that this was just a bad patch. It was over. Walking out of the house for the last time, I looked around one final moment. Everything seemed so still, so quiet. It was almost like the house was holding its breath, waiting for me to leave so it could move on. I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. Sadness for what I lost, but relief for what I gained. Clarity, strength, and the knowledge that I was finally free. I handed the keys and paperwork to my lawyer, then watched as it all became official. The divorce was finalized a few weeks later, and I signed the final papers with a steady hand, knowing I was finally closing that chapter of my life. I'd spent so long trying to hold on to something that was long gone, and now I was finally letting go. I don't regret what I did, not for a second. Betrayal like that leaves scars, but it also teaches you who you really are. I learned that trust isn't something to give blindly, it's something to protect fiercely. And revenge isn't about hurting others, it's about restoring your own dignity. Looking back now, I see everything differently. I see how fragile trust is, how quickly it can be broken, and how important it is to value yourself enough to walk away when that trust is gone. I learned that no matter how deep the pain, you always have the power to choose your path forward. You can let betrayal define you, or you can use it as a catalyst to become stronger. I hope anyone reading this who's been betrayed understands this. You are not alone, and you don't have to stay trapped in the hurt. Find your strength, reclaim your life, and remember, your happiness begins with you. No one else can take that away unless you let them. And I won't ever let anyone do that to me again.